Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
I'm joined now by the Shadow Chancellor, John McDonnell. Before we get on to that, of course, John McDonnell, we must talk about the local elections. We could have a rather dull conversation, which I say, what about Barnet? And you say, what about Trafford? And we just exchange results. Can we put all of that to one side and just ask you, you're an experienced guy, looking at the elections across the board, are there things that you conclude that Labour should be doing differently to ensure that your successes this time round are replicated in the next general election?
Before I come on to that, do you mind if I just send my best wishes to Alex Ferguson's family as well?
Very good idea. Very good idea.
Alex, as you know, is part of the Labour family. If anyone's going to fight this, it'll be him. Let's hope he comes through this well. In terms of let's get the objective analysis as much as I can. Last year, people thought the general election, our performance was a fluke. Well, we've demonstrated it was, and we've consolidated that, and we've moved it forward in terms of percentage share of the vote, which is really helpful. The intensity of our campaigning on the ground in local elections was demonstrated that we can deliver the vote. There's areas that we've got to focus on, and I'll just give the example. I think the concerns that people have, particularly outside of London, is this issue about being left behind. It motivated the Brexit vote. I think it's motivated a lot of disgruntlement at the local level as well. So how do we transform those communities? How do we get the investment in? How do we tackle the unemployment issues, those sort of things?
You did less well in, as it were, the smaller English towns outside the big metropolitan centres. Less well than they did in London and so forth.
Well, it's mixed. We picked up Kirklees, Plymouth. Trafford, I know you can say it's a northern area in Greater Manchester. Greater Manchester now completely red, no blue sea in there at all. So there are issues now about how we address those communities. This isn't just party political anymore either, that feel that their economy, particularly blighted by austerity, has left them behind. That's our work now. We're now going to tour the country with detailed seminars, discussions, going out to the community campaigning to talk about what sort of economy do they need, what public services they need, how we fund them, how we can involve the community in transforming their community. So this is going to be very positive campaigning for us.
We were talking about London. The leader of Barnet has asked you and Jeremy Corbyn to come to Barnet and apologise to the Jewish community in Barnet. And are you going to do that?
Well, we'll be meeting. I'm meeting some of the Barnet councillors next week, Tuesday night, I think. Anti-Semitism certainly had its effect. There's no doubt about it in Barnet itself. I'm hoping that the measures we've put in place now, the Chakrabarti report implemented in full, Jenny forming new General Secretary. Jeremy Corbyn said to Jenny, your first priority is tackling this issue. When we meet the Board of Deputies and the Jewish Leadership Council again in July, I'm hoping we'll be able to demonstrate to them really positive progress. But can I just go back to the point you raised earlier? This issue of racism, anti-Semitism racism, has affected our community. We cannot tolerate it, and we can't tolerate racism in any party. You mentioned Pendle. I'm now going to Pendle today, some of my family up there, our meeting party members, to have the Conservative Party take control of that council by reinstating a councillor who used the foulest joke, racist joke, is unacceptable.
It was really horrible.
I want Theresa May now to say to, well, Brandon Lewis, who congratulated those councillors, to first of all apologise and suspend that councillor again. It's unacceptable. Across parties, we've got to campaign against anti-Semitism and racism overall.
Now, I'm delighted to be joined by Labour's Barry Gardiner, its spokesman on international trade. Great to see you this morning, Barry.
I love it. Not a coup, just a conversation.
Well, I thought it was quite significant that he seems to be saying that Tory MPs, are now once again thrilled with the performance of Theresa May, which actually does tell you that their performance in the local elections was better than they feared. And the corollary of that is that your performance, surely, you will admit, was not as good as you would have liked.
Well, look, I think Wes stated it very well, actually. He talked about the need for humility in places like Barnet. Let's face it, we won 2,350 council seats. The Conservatives won 1,232 council seats. Now, they lost 33 seats, we gained 77 seats. Would I have liked to have done better? You bet. And actually, if you look at places like Wandsworth, where if there had been 141 more votes in 4 wards, we would have won that council. We needed 13 extra seats to win that council. Oh. We took 7 extra seats, and we could have done it with 141 more votes. How extraordinary that a Prime Minister goes running to Wandsworth to say, congratulations, guys, you've been wonderful. You only lost 7 seats to the Labour Party. I mean, that is not a Prime Minister who sees the pinnacle of her success culminating in a general election victory next time, is it?
But equally, as you know, because, you know, you follow the things closely, you know, for you to be confident of winning the next election, it would have been jolly helpful for you to have had a significant lead over the Tories, and that you have not achieved.
Look, of course, of course. You know, but I think what we're seeing is the way in which politics has been reshaped over the past few years with Brexit. What I'm really pleased about is that in places like Plymouth, which was a Leave area, we gained the extra seats that we needed in Plymouth to take back control of that council. Now, Plymouth is one of those areas which has had both Labour and Conservative MPs, and still does, and we look to take another seat. We've got a very good candidate, Holloway, down there, who we hope to take that seat next time.
Can I just ask on it?
The indication is good in areas not only that are Remain areas, but also critically that are Leave areas. Well, look at Kirklees.
But let's just develop some of this. Sure. I mean, one of the reasons why in a place like Barnet you're perceived not to have done as well as you wanted to do is the perception that Jeremy Corbyn, the leadership, has not tackled the cancer of anti-Semitism effectively enough. Do you think you can, in any kind of meaningful timescale, get those Jewish votes back?
Look, we have rightly come under the microscope for our failure to deal with anti-Semitism promptly, quickly and effectively, right?
And you're still not doing it, I mean...
No, absolutely we are.
Well, hang on a second.
That's why
Ken Livingstone goes on the television on Friday and immediately starts talking again about the collaboration between Hitler...
Ken Livingstone is suspended from the Labour Party and his case will be completed within the next couple of months. Now...
why 2 months? Why not 2 weeks?
The timescale is being set by the Constitutional Committee and the new General Secretary, and we've said that these cases will be concluded promptly.
But would you like them to be more... Would you like it to be speeded up?
It is being speeded up. You can't... You know, this is a... You know... A foolish question. It is being speeded up because
many of our viewers would say that was a foolish question.
You're saying that it is being speeded up, but would you like it to be speeded up?
It's been going on for 2 years.
And that's why, as I've just said to you, it is being speeded up. So to ask me if I'd like it to be speeded up, the answer is it already is being. OK? That makes sense to me. Now, but if you want to talk about anti-Semitism and us being under the microscope, then you have to say what is going on in Pendle, what is going on in Sunderland, where 2 Conservative candidates are suspended, but the moment that the election is finished and they've won their seats, they are reinstated. Now,
look, let's be clear.
No,
obviously, one wants to get the cancer of alleged racism out of all parties. Of course, one wants to get the cancer, but the focus at the moment is Labour, not the Tories.
Exactly. And my point,
because I'm talking to a representative of the Labour Party. If you were a representative of the Tory Party, it would be different.
My point to you is let's have the microscope bearing down equally on both parties. Because actually, if you look back to the London mayoral elections, that was one of the most racist elections fought by the Conservatives against our candidate Sadiq Khan as a Muslim. And now we have the...
Allegra is here to take a closer look at the local election results. I hope that's what you're going to do.
It is. Local elections are normally about things like the bins, aren't they, Robert? But this Thursday appears to have also had a bit of Brexit in the mix as well. One of the chief insights is that of the locals on Thursday is that the Tories did pretty well with Leave constituencies. 70% of Tory voters appear now to be Leave voters. Have a look at this list. This is from Matthew Goodwin, who follows these things like a hawk, and he points out some of the more notable Tory advances are places where there were huge votes for Leave in the referendum. Dudley, 70% Leave, Nuneaton, 65%, Peterborough. These are good night. This is where the Tories did well on Thursday night. That might lead some of you out there to think that the Labour Party should head off in the opposite direction and come out against Brexit and explicitly court Remain seats. Well, not so fast. Apparently, there just aren't enough votes over there. Don't trust me, trust Geek of the Week.
It's Geek of the Week.
Yes, he is a favourite here on this programme. Professor Anand Menon is this week's Geek of the Week. I can't believe he hasn't been Geek of the Week before. And he is this week for this extraordinary graph. It will be overwhelming you at home, but we will talk you through it. So the key thing about this, in a nutshell, is that Anand shows there just aren't enough constituencies waiting for a party to express clearer opposition to Brexit. So first things first, let's look up here. This rectangle shows the swing from the Tories to Labour in the last general election. So these are essentially, for the Labour Party, the low-hanging fruit. If there was a general election tomorrow, they would be hopeful they could scoop these up easily. The problem is there's just 4 of them that voted Remain. So it's Westminster, it's Chipping Barnet, it's Truro, and it's Putney. So Anand is suggesting that if they become explicitly Remain, they don't really gain that much. Instead, down here in these rectangle, these 2 underneath the line, these are Leave constituencies. You should be able to see at home a huge number more red dots. They are Labour targets. So you've got places like Mansfield and Walsall North. This is where Labour can do pretty well. Of course, you can see a huge cluster in the middle, so a position where they sit on the fence is quite good too. But the most important thing, we think, is that Labour cannot afford to leave voters. Robert.
So that, I think, is one of the big questions, and I'm going to talk about it with Grant and Wes. Wes, so there is a view among some of your colleagues that you can't move, you know, in the way that, for example, I think you and Chukaramuna would like the party to move, which is to sign up, for example, for continued membership of the single market, because that wouldn't win you enough pro-EU supporters as voters, and you might alienate too many Leave voters. What's your own view about that?
Well, I think at the last election, Labour's sort of constructive ambiguity on this was very helpful.
But you can't be ambiguous.
No, you can't. I think we kind of reached the end of the road on this. It's kind of like the old Nye Bevan quote, you know, if you stay in the middle of the road, you know, you get mown down. Sure. And I think there are 2 things really on the electoral side, and I'll come to the actual principle. Yeah. Firstly, I think the local election results show that we're also vulnerable to resurgent Liberal Democrats and Greens in Remain areas, so we can't take our Remain voters for granted. But also, you know, in all of those constituencies that we need to win, I think there'll be lots of Conservatives who voted Remain who'll be pretty appalled at the hard Brexit stance that Theresa May's being dragged towards. And so there are some of those voters up for grabs. But secondly, there's a principle of this, which is that outside of the single market and the customs union, we put people's jobs at risk, we put their livelihoods at risk. In terms of the things people complain about the race to the bottom in workers' rights, terms and conditions, all of that is at risk. And this is a once-in-a-lifetime moment. If we get Brexit wrong, we have to live with this for generations.
Can I just very briefly, because I obviously need to move on to Grant in a second, but do you get any sense that Jeremy Corbyn is listening to you on this?
Well, we have shifted. Our position in the customs union now is not as it was maybe a year or so ago. So he's moving. But, you know, your question earlier...
The question is, will you sign up for membership of the EEA, do you think, as a party?
Well, I hope so. I mean, I agree with most of what Barry said throughout his interview until we got to Europe, where... You know, like Barry, I voted in favour in virtually the same amendment that the House of Lords is being asked to vote on this week. I think it is incredible that Labour seems to be the biggest stumbling block to remaining in the single market. I don't think that is a morally, principally justifiable position. It's certainly not the position of a majority of our members, a majority of Labour voters and trade unionists. So I hope we'll get some movement on this by the week. I hope members of the House of Lords will do what they think is right and support Lord Ali's amendment anyway. But this is ridiculous. We've got enough Conservatives in the House of Commons to defend that amendment if the House of Lords pass it, so I hope they will.
You have a slightly different problem, it seems to me, which is, I would say, the mood of Parliament in general is for a slightly softer Brexit, and it's certainly the mood of big companies. They want a softer Brexit. And yet the reason you did relatively well in the local elections is because you were picking up all these UKIP voters. So some would say that the Prime Minister has now become a prisoner of the Brexiter tendency, led perhaps by Jacob Rees-Mogg. So she's got to go for a harder Brexit. But then there's an issue about whether she can actually get that through Parliament.
Well, actually, there's issues on both sides, of course, because we've seen in some of the votes before this went off to the House of Lords and got defeated many times, it doesn't take many pro-Remainers to cause an upset as well. So she's caught between a rock and a hard place. And I suppose the wider question is, does it mean that in future the party will have to be hard Brexit in every sense, and then how does that play into future elections? Does that mean that in order to win, we always have to tack to the Brexit side of things? But actually, I've got some overlaying theory slightly different to that, which is most people in this country were having these conversations about the EEA and customs union, which most people had never heard of before the whole Brexit thing came up in the first place. The truth is, most people in this country don't know or actually care about the specifics of that. What they care about is whether they're getting decent health, decent housing, the economy is still running, etc. Sure. In other words, the prize will go to the person, the party, who demonstrate that they can still run this country effectively. Whether we're in an EEA or the customs union, what have you, is a second, third, fourth order issue to them. What they want is the outcome, the result of it, and we will be rewarded or punished by how well we succeed in just getting a decent outcome.
But the paradox of all of this, of course, is that the obsession of Parliament with Brexit means that almost none of the other issues that, you know, that matter to people out there are being really pursued with the vigour that they should be.
So before the referendum, we always used to say, whilst time I was chairman, Europe always appeared to be, if you asked in people's opinions, Europe appeared to be not just a first, second or third tier issue, but a fifth, sixth. If you asked people their priorities, it was always NHS, it was always the economy. And so most people are just not that focused on it. Parliament has to be, because we have to have a new legal framework. And until we have that, we can't do anything else.
But first, Labour were, of course, hoping to make some big gains on Thursday night, building on their success in the 2017 general election. But the party's performance fell short of their own, perhaps overly inflated expectations. And the man responsible for that election strategy is party chairman Ian Lavery, who joins us now live from Newcastle. Thanks for being with us today.
Good morning.
I hope you managed to get rid of that fly before the interview. Let's talk local elections, shall we?
As always, it just come right on your nose in just as the programme starts. It's a weird thing, anyway.
Well, at least it seems to have left you alone now. Now, let's talk about the local election, shall we? Labour won just 78 more councillors, ended up unchanged in terms of councils. Were you disappointed by those results?
If you look back, I mean, we've not only consolidated at the local elections, we've made an advance as well. If you look back, you know, Sophie, it's only 14 months where the Labour Party was some 24 percentage points behind in the polls. And then leading up to the snap election, we were just behind the Conservatives following the general election. And the results which we had on Thursday were an improvement by probably somewhere in the region of 2.5%, which brought the Labour Party neck and neck with the Conservatives. So, although we didn't have massive gains, as perhaps was projected by the Conservative Central Office, we were happy enough to say that we didn't stand still and we moved forward. And we believe there's much, much more to come, by the way. Much, much more to come.
You see, I can't work out, genuinely, if you're trying to put a positive spin on things, fair enough, that's your job, or if you really think that these results are an advance, if they really are something to be pleased about.
Well, it isn't Spain, it's factually correct, and I've mentioned the statistics. We gained by about 2.5 percentage points on Thursday, and if you look at John Curtis, the renowned pollist, he said on Thursday that if we replicated the results on Thursday, the actual vote share, then the Labour Party would be in government now. We would be the biggest party in the country, and the Conservatives would be way behind. They would lose 30 odd seats. So we've got to look at that as being a positive. Only 14 months ago, people were suggesting that we were facing annihilation and that if the party had nowhere else to go. So we are quite pleased with that. We made some advances on Thursday. We made advances in London. And let us just say, Sophie, the fact that the Conservative headquarters central office predicted through the media that there would be a Tory wipeout in London. They weren't our projections, they weren't our predictions. We wanted to have a good result in London. We got a very good result in the constituencies in London, and we're quite pleased with that.
Well, it's not just the Conservatives talking about a Conservative wipeout in London, was it? I mean, Sadiq Khan said there's now no corner of London where Labour can't win. Jeremy Corbyn launched the Labour campaign from Westminster. I mean, it wasn't just the Conservatives who were expecting to do better in London. You were as well.
Well, we did do better in London. Let's look at Wandsworth, for example. Wandsworth, the Conservative headquarters suggested that we would win that easy. That's where Theresa May went to on Friday morning. She hung on to the flagship of Wandsworth by her very fingertips. But when you look and just dig a little bit and look at the statistics, the Labour Party got the popular vote in Wandsworth by more than by more than 2,000 votes. We got good results in lots of the constituencies, the wards within Wandsworth. We actually won 7 seats. Huge strides forward in Wandsworth. And we only fell short of taking Wandsworth Council by roughly 141 votes. Listen, that cannot be sniffed at. It's huge progress. This is the flagship council of the Tory party. This is Thatcher's big flagship of the Conservatives for generations. We were only a whisker away from taking Wandsworth. That's not something we should be disappointed at. It's something we will build on and we'll take forward. And I think we've got a bright future in those wards, those constituencies in London in particular. But it wasn't just London. Look at what happened in Trafford, for example. We took the Trafford Council, the last Tory blue flagship in Greater Manchester in the northwest. We took that from Tory, no overall control from the Tories, to the Labour Party being the biggest party in Trafford. What a brilliant success. We won Plymouth. We won Kirklees. We took control of Tower Hamlets. We had a reasonable night, despite the fact that the press would like to say that it was a miserably poor night for the Labour Party.
At the same time, it seems to me, looking at these results, that what you're seeing is stasis. The Conservatives doing well in the kind of suburbs and the shires, Labour piling up votes in places like Trafford, in places like London, not really breaking through outside the areas that you already feel quite comfortable in. And by what you're saying, it doesn't seem like there's much soul-searching going on as to why that is. Are you actually learning any lessons from the results?
Well, Sophie, let me tell you that the conclusion of any election, whether it be local elections or whether it would be a by-election or whether it would be the general elections, the party, and most parties do the same, have a complete and utter post-mortem into what happened in the different areas and the different regions, and we'll be doing exactly the same. And we will be learning, yes, because people make mistakes, and we will be learning from what actually happened during the campaign in 2018. But it's not as negative as what people, or some people, would like to portray it. We have made an advancement of somewhere in the region of 2.5%. If we can replicate that in the next 2 or 3 years, come the general election, we'll be on 47, 48 percentage points. That would be enough to win a general election.
OK, now I want to talk about Barnet. On paper, it should have been one of your easiest targets, of course. You kind of fell short there. And there was this anti-Semitism row, which many people feel cost you that council. Now, this morning, Sky News spoke to Adam Langelburn, who was a Labour councillor who lost his seat in that area. And we asked him, if you had a question to put to you, to put to the Labour leadership, what would you want to say? So let's just listen to that.
I'd say it's not a smear. I'd say he needs to come to Barnet. He needs to meet with the Jewish community. It wasn't just Barnet, actually. It was also Haringey and Manchester and Liverpool. We lost in any area which had large numbers of Jewish people. They need to really engage. They need to understand and feel the pain that people feel, that I feel, that my family feel, that the Labour Party, the party that the Jewish community helped build 100 years ago, has all of a sudden turned on the Jewish community. And that is so painful. And I don't think people at the top of the Labour Party quite recognise how painful this is for so many people in the Jewish community.
Now, Adam believes that elements of the Labour Party have a problem with racism. Is he right?
I think in the Labour Party there's been a problem with anti-Semitism. There's a problem with racism, with all forms of bullying, harassment and intimidation. We'll root that out. Let me make it clear to Adam and all his colleagues, we will again integrate within the Jewish community. We will make this right. We will put this right. There'll be massive discussions, lots of intense discussions with the Jewish community. We met with the Board of Deputies, etc., only a couple of weeks ago. Them discussions will continue. And my heart goes out to the likes of Adam and others in the Jewish communities who have put a lot into the Labour Party. And yes, many of them, councillors that is, may not have been returned within their constituencies, or we've lost constituencies because of what happened in the row on anti-Semitism. We'll put this right. We've got a new General Secretary, Jenny Formby. Jenny's got this at the top of her political agenda. Anti-Semitism has no role, no place at all in the Labour Party. We will root it out from top to bottom. Of that, as the chairman of the party, I can categorically tell you.
Strong message there from you on anti-Semitism. I wonder if you'll be equally strong in another area where it feels as though Labour perhaps slipped behind expectations, and that's in areas that voted to leave the European Union. Do you think that Labour's stance on Brexit, remaining in the customs union, is damaging the party in some of those areas that voted leave?
Well, again, Sophie, it's a mixed bag. We look at the Midlands, of course, here were really disappointing results. The leave areas in the Midlands, the working class, white working class areas, and we've got a challenge here. Look at the North East where we are at this moment in time, hugely, again, leave area, where we cleared, we cleaned the floor. It's basically totally red. We gained seats in different constituencies in the North East. So there's a whole mishmash with regards to the issue of Brexit. But the Labour Party is absolutely adamant. We stand clear by what we said in our manifesto. We want a Brexit which secures jobs, the economy, and a whole number of other things. We also said that we're happy with the transitional period. During that transitional period, what we will do is abide by the customs union and the single market rules, and following that, we would want a deal on a customs union and a deal on the single market as well. And of course, it's very, very difficult as a party where you've got diverse views. But listen, it's not the only party with problems with regards to the Brexit situation. The Conservatives are tearing themselves apart. Only this morning in the press, you can see the attacks from the Brexiteers and the Remainers. Both groups are saying that Theresa May must adhere to what they say or they'll walk. Now, she's got a multitude of problems facing her as a Prime Minister. We're looking at the situation. We're absolutely crystal clear on where we stand with regards to Brexit.
OK, I think we'll be speaking about some of the Conservatives' positions on Brexit after the break. Thank you very much, Ian Lavery. Now, Labour failed to take any London boroughs off the Conservatives in this week's local elections, including Wandsworth, which the Prime Minister visited on Friday morning. But it was far from a victory for the Conservatives, who lost 7 councillors to Labour and the popular vote. In fact, if 200 votes had gone the other way, Wandsworth could have turned red. But the close numbers perhaps mask a deeper rift in politics, as I discovered when I visited the borough earlier this week.
Northcote Ward in affluent Clapham, South London. If you're a lady who likes to lunch, this is your area. It's not a natural Labour target, and although the party did better here than at any election since 1986, in the end, Wandsworth Council remained blue.
This area's always done well for Conservative, and they've looked after us, and I don't see any reason why to change.
So you voted Conservative, did you?
Of course I did.
And how about in the general election? Would you vote Conservative in general?
I'm not sure. That's up in the air at the moment. I think we've got to see how Conservative get on in the next 6 months with Brexit and everything else, and then make a decision from there.
So that'd be a real big test for them then?
I think it will be, yeah, of course.
As a young man, if I put myself online as a Conservative, I just get shouted down. So I think I'll just keep my I can't say I'm openly a conservative, because if I do, I'll be like, oh, that guy's conservative, bring him down. But I think the Corbynist left-wing sort of view of the country is very divisive, and I think it needs to stop. We need to work together, not be against each other all the time. I mean, I think it goes all the way to the top. With politicians, they need to start behaving like real people and stop behaving like children.
I'm a Conservative supporter, but I would like there to be more opposition, to be fair.
On Brexit, is that what you're saying, or more generally?
More just generally. I think we could do with a stronger opposition.
So even as a Conservative, you would like to see Labour doing better?
Healthy for politics, isn't it? Healthy for democracy.
Around the corner on Clapham Common, the lack of enthusiasm for politics and politicians continued.
So you're a Labour supporter yourself then?
Yes.
Yeah. How do you think Labour are doing at the minute?
I think we need to improve. I think we need to be the opposition in waiting and really actually just develop a bit more certainty, a bit more economic, dare I say, competence.
London's like a little country inside the UK. We do our own thing. We think differently about Brexit than everybody else. There's lots of things different.
Now, I know that we are in the heart of Tory territory here, but even so, I've been struck by the sheer number of Conservative voters that I've spoken to. It really doesn't feel like a Labour target, and maybe that's the lesson of the local elections. The Conservatives piling up votes in their strongholds, Labour doing the same in theirs, and the country staying just as divided as ever.
And that looks like the shape of modern British politics. Two parties in stasis, failing to break through and unite this still divided nation.
Well, one person with a strong view on the strength of the Conservatives in South West London and beyond is the former Education Secretary and MP for Putney, Justin Greening. Welcome, thanks for being on the show.
And welcome back, Sophie.
Thank you. I just wanted to pick up on some of what people were saying when I went to Wandsworth, because the Conservatives, it feels as though some people feel that they did better than expected in the local elections, but you still ended up losing seats. And that first gentleman that I spoke to, who said that he likes Wandsworth Council, he voted Conservative locally, but he's going to see what happens on Brexit. He's not sure about the Conservatives nationally. I mean, you do have some problems, don't you?
I think his comments showed how pragmatic voters are. They really do see through a lot of the spin to something that's much more practical about what will voting mean for me. In his case, he knows he's got a good local council that's got low council tax but very good services. And that was a package people wanted to stay voting for. But actually, quite rightly, he sees that as different from who he might want to support at the next election. Indeed, I spoke to a Labour voter who was in a similar position, where he said, I've always voted Labour, but I really have asked myself, after the Russia and Skripal scandal where people saw Corbyn as really weak on that, he said, I really don't know whether I could ever practically vote to put him into Downing Street. And I think what it shows is people are very pragmatic, but they also want to see, I think, centre ground politics come back in our country. And that's something that maybe they feel has slightly gone, and the Brexit debate feeling like it's polarising public opinion, when actually what people want to see are politicians working together for people, and it being less about the politics and a bit more about them.
Labour ran you pretty close in Wandsworth. Are you worried about your own seat at the next election?
Oh, I just do my very best for my local community, and then it's up to them who they want representing them at the next election. But I do think I won that seat from Labour in 2005, and actually the political climate then wasn't a million miles away from where it is now. People disenchanted with Labour at the time, but not really feeling like the Conservatives were necessarily a good alternative. So I think you win by being in the centre ground, but I think for London Conservatives, we had a very modern, open outlook, a liberal outlook. I think it was just modern politics about delivery on the ground for people and taking their priorities as a local community, making them ours, and then backing that up with a record of delivery day to day that people could see for themselves. So that's why they kept it.
Is that where you think the Conservative Party is at the moment then, in the centre ground, this open politics that you're talking about?
I don't think that people necessarily feel that. I think people feel we have gone more towards the right than perhaps we had under David Cameron, for example.
Is that a mistake, you think?
I think you win elections by having a broad coalition of support for you as a party. I think the last time we won an election with any massive majority, it was in 1987. We have got to be a party that really connects not just with how people think about a government that runs Britain in their interest, but how they feel about our country. And in terms of where we go on Brexit. You know, I think my experience talking to people on the doorstep is they want to get through Brexit and they want us to get onto what's the kind of country we're trying to build after Brexit. And really this perpetual preoccupation with Brexit is perhaps understandable, but I think they see politicians as really obsessing over that when what they want is for the political class to really start focusing on what's after and what are we going to do about the issues that drove the Brexit vote in the first place. For example, the fact that people growing up in very different parts of the country seem to have very different chances of reaching their potential and having opportunity.
On that point, you went to a comprehensive school in Rotherham. You were the first person in your family to go to university. Do you think the Conservatives are doing enough to speak to those 18-year-old aspirational kids in Rotherham?
I think we do need to do more. We've got a good message of them. We've always been the party that stands for equality of opportunity. The challenge we've got as a country is that's never been the case in practice, and we now need to ask ourselves as a party and ask ourselves as a country, what is it going to take to make sure that it doesn't matter where you're growing up, it doesn't matter what your circumstances are, you can have an equal shot at opportunity. We can't have a closed shop when it comes to opportunity. People still feel like it's connections that matter more than your talent, more than your competence. And we've got to change that, but it needs to be the Conservative Party that's really leading the charge on showing how we can do that practically in modern Britain.
So to coin a phrase, is it time to take back control of the Conservative Party from the centre ground, people like you?
I think people want to hear pragmatic voices in the Conservative Party that aren't ideologically driven, but are focused on putting people first, not the politics.
Now, the Conservatives might have outperformed expectations at the local elections, but if the results were replicated at a general election, they'd be unable to form a majority. So is there really much to celebrate? Well, let's ask the party's chairman, Brandon Lewis, who joins us now. So you lost seats, you lost councils. Are you really happy with the results?
Well, I've said, actually, since Thursday, it was a good night for us in the sense we gained councils, we outperformed what people expected, but it's very much stage one, and there is
gained
a
some
big...
councils, but
we gained... We'll see over the next few weeks, but I think we will have gained at the end about 7 councils we will have taken control, either from Labour or from no overall control. And we managed to hold on to councils in London that Labour said they would turn London completely red. We even technically gained Barnet back with a majority of 13, but I've been very clear about this. There's no complacency. We've got a big piece of work to do. This was just stage one of what will be a 4-year piece of work.
Is the real risk here that you're kind of piling on votes in your comfort areas? So older voters, white voters, voters in suburbs, in the shires, where Labour is doing the same with kind of metropolitan voters in cities. It feels as if it's kind of a deadlock, that's a stasis, that they've got 2 losers. Would you agree with that assessment?
No, and actually I think 2 points, and if you like, at 2 levels. I think, first of all, around the country over the last few months, when I've been travelling around to all parts of the country, I'm seeing both our volunteers, activists, candidates and the people on the doorsteps of all backgrounds, all ages, in all parts of the country supporting what we're doing and actually getting involved, and that's a good thing. And actually, at a secondary level, if that was the case, we wouldn't have held on to the councils Labour expected to win, like Wandsworth, Westminster, and indeed winning back Barnet. You held on,
but actually, if you look at the popular vote, you were quite lucky, really, to hang on to places like Wandsworth, weren't you?
Well, I don't put it down to luck at all. I put it down to the really hard work of good local volunteers, good councillors and candidates who have been out there talking about the issues that matter to local people every day. Low council tax, particularly in Wandsworth and Westminster, and good frontline services.
Are you worried that... although you've taken votes off UKIP away from the cities, now the real challenge is taking votes off Labour. And if you look at these results, there's not really much evidence that you have been successful in doing that.
Well, again, in London, we gained seats from Labour in Hillingdon and in Barnet, of course, where we've got a majority of 13 now. But I'm very open about the fact as I say, we've got work to do over the next 4 years. This is just stage one in terms of that level of work, and we've got to make sure that we are talking to people, as I said, from all backgrounds. Exactly what the Prime Minister said, delivering for everybody right across the United Kingdom. Now,
earlier in the show, we played a film from Wandsworth where I went to go and talk to voters to find out, what they were feeling about the main parties. And there was one young man who really stood out to me with what he said. And I'll just read you what he did say. He said, as a young man, if I put myself online as a Conservative, I just get shouted down. I can't say openly I'm a Conservative, because if I do, people will just say, oh, that guy's a Conservative, bring him down. I mean, do you think he's effectively saying that young people are ashamed to say that they're Conservative?
Actually, I recognise the challenge that he's got, but I see it a very different way, actually. What I've seen online, not just for people who want to say they support the Conservative Party, but actually we've seen it even with moderate Labour MPs, the abuse that we see online and the sheer attrition from the hard left, which I think there is an argument is actually purposely to try and put people off having proper, robust debate. It's why we were very clear about having a respect pledge. We need to have a robust debate, but it's got to be with respect. And what we do see online is this really kind of nasty, sometimes really quite personal, and actually in some cases even calling for physical abuse and attacks. It's completely unacceptable. And we've got to make sure all of us in public life are prepared to take that on, get involved in the debate, both online and in the general public, to create that airspace so more people can feel confident about coming forward and talking about what they care about.
But I want to go back to that point as well, though, because if people do feel confident to come out and say, I'm a Conservative, is that because they're worried about the image of the party and how it's seen? It's not helped, is it, for example, when Conservative councillors post racist or repost racist jokes on social media? And, of course, I'm talking about a joke that was made by or posted again by Rosemary Carroll from Pendle Council. And I can't even refer to what she said because, frankly, it's pretty abhorrent. I mean, that is not helping your cause, is it?
Well, what was posted, the actual... It was called a joke. I don't see it as a joke. It's completely unacceptable. But let's be very clear about this, because there's a lot of misinformation being put out there at the moment. I think it's right to get a chance to just clear that up, not just for her, but actually more generally. This was a situation that occurred last year, actually in about June last year. Her position has been from the very beginning that she accidentally posted something she wanted to delete. She was suspended by the party at that point for 3 months. The Labour-run council, which was, of course, supported by the BNP at the time, put a punishment in place. She's also gone through diversity training since then and has been a Conservative councillor for some time. So there's a lot of misinformation, not a lot of the facts out there. But
so
what
that's
she
fine,
said...
if she said she accidentally posted something, it's not a problem.
Well,
she can come back.
Let's not have double standards.
Welcome her back into the Conservative Party.
I think we've got to be very clear. We don't have double standards. First of all, she's been through training. She's apologised. She has had punishment. Now, this was all dealt with locally at the time. I am going to be having a look at this. But there's also a big contrast between where we are and where Labour are. First of all, of course, the leader of the opposition's position is he didn't understand the mural. This is a councillor who has gone through punishment and training over it. But we also, when we have these issues, we deal with them. And she's a good example of that. That was dealt with at the time. It was dealt with locally, to be fair, as well.
Are you happy with how it's been dealt? Because I just want to go back to... It's hard because you can't actually refer to what was written, but it really is abhorrent. It's repugnant. Are you happy with someone like that representing the Conservative Party who, even if it was an accident, posted it on their Facebook page?
Well, let's be very clear. Her position is it was an accident. She was suspended. She's been through diversity training. The punishment she had was endorsed by the Labour Party and the BNP, who supported them on that council at the time. So we need to be very clear about where the facts are. But it is something I'm going to be having a look at, because we've been very clear from the beginning. In our party, if we have an issue come up, as we have done over the last few months, when it comes up, we won't do what the Labour Party does and pretend it doesn't exist. We will deal with it.
So you're going to look at it again. Does that mean she could be kicked out of the party?
I'm not going to prejudge any kind of due diligence work. It's right that we go through this properly. But I also, again, want to stress, this was dealt with locally last year, and the position that was taken was one that was actually not just endorsed by, but actually, of course, the council's position was the Labour Party and the BNP. So it is somewhat ironic, if not hypocritical, for them in the position they've taken in the last 24 hours.
There's been much disagreement between different parts of the Labour Party about whether Thursday's results were a storming success or a bit of a disappointment. But what role's been played by Momentum, the Corbyn supporting campaign group, which seems to be loved and feared in equal measure, even within the Labour Party? Last year, the group's chair, John Lansman, addressed the question of how welcome Momentum were in Labour after issuing a very clear warning to the Conservatives.
They need to prepare because we're in their constituencies now. We're training our canvassers to persuade people on the doorstep. We're mobilising thousands of people every weekend to go to Tory marginals and unseat Tory MPs. I think there was internal strife, and I think I've learnt the lessons that internal strife doesn't help the Labour Party. I think we saw that in the starting point of the general election campaign, which followed 2 years of too much strife in the Labour Party after Jeremy Corbyn's first victory.
Well, we're joined now in the studio by Huda Elmi. She's a member of Momentum's National Coordinating Group. Welcome. How many people did you manage to get out campaigning in the local elections? This is meant to be your great strength, that you've got enthusiastic young volunteers who'll go out and knock on the doors. In what kind of numbers were they doing that?
Thousands of people turn up all across the country in places that we thought unwinnable and in places that, you know, we thought were marginal. And everywhere that we did go, we saw an increase in either vote share or we delivered, you know, the fantastic results that we have seen in places, you know, like in Coventry where I was campaigning, where we have a fantastic Labour council in an area that for 20 years was under the Tory thumb. So,
and Momentum are working with Owen Jones on what they called the Unseat campaign. It was a bit negative, wasn't it? Focusing just on Tories and saying you should unseat them simply because they're Conservatives. There wasn't much in it that told us why you should be voting Labour, what positive reasons there were to vote Labour. It was just simply targeting Conservatives.
No, I'd have to disagree with that. I think that the Unseat campaigns were very much about pushing a positive message, about pushing Labour campaigners in local communities, on the doorstep, making contact with people who hadn't been talked to for over 20 years. And that's why the massive difference and the massive results that we saw happened. It was because we had Labour members going out and making a difference in communities that needed it most. And I think that the reason why it has such a negative connotation to it, and the Tories are trying to push that, is because they just don't have the capacity and the groundswell that Momentum has. They're frightened of the powerful movement that is the Labour Party, rather than being frightened of, you know, the word unseat.
And did you do as much as you had hoped? I mean, you targeted 10 councils with this Unseat campaign. Labour ended up in control of one of them?
I think we've had remarkable results, even in places that we didn't, you know, get the results that we wanted. Wandsworth, for instance, 85 votes shy of a Labour, you know, like Labour council, and this was Thatcher's favourite council. So, you know, there is that to also add to it. And I think that, yeah, no, I think we did remarkable considering it is again a local election. It's not as sexy as a general election. You know, this is about, you know, potholes and bin collections. But I think we still made that push, and we still set out an amazing political agenda, and people definitely subscribed to it.
I'm going to bring the panel in now, if you don't mind. We'll all have a chat together. Tom, were Momentum a positive asset to Labour in this campaign?
Yeah, absolutely. They put bodies on streets, and the sheer manpower that Momentum can commit to contests is something that the Tories simply cannot keep up with. People on streets, knocking on doors, getting people out to vote is always really important in elections, always was, and it still will be. They didn't, however, as has just been admitted, cross the line on this, you know, 9 out of the 10 target seats, Wandsworth, Kensington, Chelsea, Westminster. So maybe people on the streets preaching a hard left brand of politics can only get you so far.
I think you know, all we have to do is ask the MP in Kensington and Chelsea, and ask, you know, the leader of Trafford's council. You know, they will say, and they openly admit, you know, it was Momentum and the Unseat campaign and having all of these campaigners on the ground that made a difference. And I think that we can definitely grow on that.
Why didn't you win the councils then?
I think we did, but this is the thing: we made massive gains in areas. I mean, it was a mixed bag of results, and I think that there was a lot to grow on from that. And I think, particularly considering how, if this had been a general election, we would be the majority party in Parliament. I think that there is a lot to work on, but I think there's a lot of successes.
You wouldn't be the majority party. You'd have 283 MPs. The Tories had 280.
We'd be the largest party. We'd be the largest party.
You'd be the largest party.
Exactly. So I think, again, you know, that's a positive step forward, and that's something we can grow on, and something we can build on. And I think this is a fantastic set of results to kind of move forward with.
I mean, Dawn, you're sympathetic to Momentum, yet they're still massively controversial within the Labour Party. There are still large swathes of the party who simply will not accept Momentum's presence.
Yeah, I find that very strange. A lot of people, I'm 30, most people I know are relatively young, and they really, really like Momentum. They feel as if Momentum has brought them into a party that ignored them for decades. I mean, I went to university in Coventry, and when I used to go out campaigning for Labour, there'd be 4 of us on the streets. And so it's incredible to see just a groundswell of, you know, people coming out for them. I think that most Labour MPs now accept that they're a force for good. They're great when they come into local communities. I live next door to Wandsworth, and it's incredible. Just, you know, that was a Tory council that should have been blue forever, and now they're running scared. And it's incredible just how much Momentum have managed to do just in this local election. They didn't win all of the councils. I mean, Trafford, for instance, there was one Tory council that were only able to remain Tory because they brought in somebody who was suspended for racist jokes. So this is because Momentum have really forced them into this position.
Melanie, are Momentum genuinely changing British politics?
It would sound like it if, as we just heard, it is really the case that most Labour MPs now regard Momentum as a force for good, then the Labour Party has lost. The Labour Party will become a hard left, nasty party, and people will then have a very clear choice. Is that happening? I don't know. take the point that, you know, any organisation that brings voters out onto the streets is obviously a very great asset. But if that organisation also stands for fundamental intolerance to dissent and other points of view, a fundamentally hard-left position, a fundamental attitude which regards any moderate Labour MPs as ripe for deselection, then that party may be bringing out onto the streets people to support it, but that party is going to turn into a party that will be rejected by many millions of other British voters.
Huda, what did you say to those accusations?
I think obviously they are your opinion and you're completely free to hold them, but I think I would disagree on almost every single point. I think that a mass movement, you know, with people young, old, of all kinds of political traditions being brought together and seeing that, you know, politics and the stagnation and the inertia that's become pretty much synonymous with politics needs to change, and that there's no such thing as a seat for life anymore. That doesn't exist. We're going to set forth the political agenda and people agree with it.
We'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much for coming in to talk to us.